Hi everyone, this is Blake Anderson, and I'm a registered social worker and therapist here in Toronto, Ontario. And I have over 14 years of collective experience working as a registered social worker and 5 years as a therapist. In this video, I want to talk about the distinction between narcissism and psychopathic tendencies or traits, particularly the shared fantasy in the notion that when a narcissist and a psychopath are in a relationship with another person, could be romantic or in a family dynamic, this shared fantasy is used in different ways. And I also want to speak about the notion of reality testing and how the narcissist and the psychopath are different in this regard. So there's a lot of literature and videos online about aspects of narcissism. There's a lot of debate between is it evil and are they intentional? A lot of people do believe that they're making choices because they know how to act in certain situations. And so I guess I'm just going to sideline that debate for a second and mention how, at least according to Sam Vatt, a psychopath is very much more in touch with reality, in the sense that they know a closer sense of reality testing and they know how to manipulate reality to get their results. So they're intentionally knowing what they're doing, whereas a narcissist, according to him, is basically they create a movie and they cast themselves as the main character. And then you yourself are part of that movie in that sense of a shared fantasy. And within that, they are convinced that they're in this movie and that if you're speaking against this movie, they will look at you and say, what are you talking about? This is the movie, this is life. And so they are embedded in the shared fantasy because they're more primordial and underdeveloped in themselves, the same kind of narcissistic supply that you supply them, in the sense that they idolize you. So they encourage your narcissistic tendencies in the sense that I think we all want to be liked and admired, but their image of you is very much exaggerated. Sam Vatkin mentions that this is the oceanic aspect of like a primordial being. So when we're babies and we're with our mother, we are embedded within the mother in some sense. And then over time, especially when we're two, and as we develop as children, we start to assert our ego and we separate ourselves from the mother. But the basic notion is that we have this need to go back into this primordial soup, to this place where there aren't problems and that we're idolized. At least maybe not problems, but a sense of it being more caring and loving. But it's an illusion, right? Because that's the exact opposite of what occurs in reality. According to Sam Vatkin, he believes that a lot of people get connected and tied in with this. He says that the majority of people, or at least a lot of people, can get stuck in this. It's not but it is a person likely that they're reality testing, because reality is difficult, right? Reality can be harsh. There's suffering in the world. We have our own issues, our insecurities. Maybe in our family of origin, we were mistreated. And so when a romantic person comes in our life and idolizes us, and this is a little bit of confusion because in the romantic stage of getting to know someone, there is going to be a level of a shared fantasy. And so we all kind of get stuck in that love bombing stage, but it's different with a narcissist as they're mirroring you often. Their idolization is much more exaggerated and it's used more to hook you. Whereas a loving, caring person might be in this shared fantasy, but there's still a sense that they care and love you for who you are, and it's not to do with them and getting a narcissistic supply. The notion is that within the shared fantasy, the narcissist is semi-psychotic, so they don't have close connection with reality. And so, again, because they're not a fully formed self, they merge with the world. They believe you're a character in their movie. And but the thing is, you experience gaslighting, manipulation, and basically the lies that they give you. And it's likely you have righteous rage, so you get angry at that over time especially, and you want to keep them accountable for that. But then when they look at you and you talk to them about it, usually they'll continue to gaslight and continue to have defenses against that. But they also look at you and say, what are you talking about? I'm not as bad as you make it sound to be. They very much believe the shared fantasy. You experience it as gaslighting and manipulation and lies, and certainly from the outside it is. In the reality of the narcissist, that is just them being in their shared fantasy and their illusion. Because they don't have proper reality testing, they take it as reality and are confounded about why you wouldn't see their reality testing as grounded in reality. So whereas a psychopath, right, they know, like, they're using the shared fantasy as a tool to manipulate you and to gaslight you and to get certain ends they want. So it could be, sex, it could be money, it could be status. But they're doing this intentionally, right? Whereas for the narcissist, it's them in a movie. They think that you're being silly or dumb, and they also split you. If you challenge them, they'll likely put you in a certain box and make you into a bad object. They'll discredit you in some capacity. That's why it's really tricky in these dynamics, because let's say that you have a mother or a father who is narcissist. They usually have convinced the family, or at least people around them, that they're not this bad person and that they're this caring, loving person. And so there's one, the fact that other people are buying into this shared fantasy, but then two, they don't recognize and see it objectively. And when you call it out on them, they look at you like, what are you talking about? So they don't really see it, right? And because their memory is also not 100%, and they have ways to use memory to basically emphasize their ego, and it's not proper memory, they confound themselves and exaggerate who they are. And they have defenses against you pointing out any of the negative because they're false self. But they take that as reality. You calling them out on them or having any accountability, like, it's hard to argue, right, with someone who's psychotic. Like in child welfare, I would go to homes, and sometimes I met with this mom once, and she was quite paranoid. She had a couple kids, and we were involved with the family, and the father was more, grounded and had, like, you didn't have mental health necessarily, but he was with his wife, who very much was, I would say, likely paranoid, maybe paranoid schizophrenic. She definitely had delusions. She felt like the police were hacking her phone or spying on her. A lot of the evidence and theory is not to argue with someone who has delusions. I've worked with those people in the past, and you're not going to get anywhere, right? I guess that's the point of this video, to explain that you're not going to get anywhere trying to keep your narcissistic parent, mother or father accountable. You're going to just spin yourself, get quite anxious, and then you're going to likely react and have emotional dysregulation and feed the cycle. And that's why, for your own mental emotional health, especially if you're with somebody there's crazy making, and so you're finding yourself dysregulated and spinning a lot of the time, you're likely knowing that you're dealing with a difficult personality. So that's to take the book, The 5 Personalities to Avoid. And in that book, he just talks about, if you're having that experience where there's crazy making and you're finding yourself out of sorts and dysregulated, it's most likely you're dealing with a narcissist or some personality disorder. And that's just to know also that you have ability to self-reflect and to amend your actions. But if you get stuck in the cycle where you're trying to keep them accountable, you have what could be justified, and it is justified, the way you were treated, but you will start to almost act out certain narcissistic defenses in that. And perhaps in the family dynamic or in the situation, it'll draw attention to yourself, and there will be probably actual genuine narcissistic tendencies in yourself that will come online and be expressed. Most likely, let's say it's your mom and your father, you realize that you have a family of origin that is very much dysfunctional, and you have parents that have not proper reality testing and they're semi-psychotic, and yet you're mistreated in that dynamic and you are angry at them for justified reasons. But then when you speak with them and point this out, it's like you're yelling into a void, because there's not really a person there. There's the false self and likely this child part, and they want sympathy sometimes, kind of want your empathy and compassion for this child part of themselves. And so you keep them accountable, but an illusion of the false self, it's many forms. And so you're both dealing with a void as well as this character of a person. It is your mom and your father, and it's like you want there to be some justice and recognition, but you realize that you're likely never going to get it. And so that's why you realize at a certain point that arguing with the void or trying to keep someone who's semi-psychotic accountable, and going back to that notion that there's that paranoid person I was mentioning, it's just a waste of energy and time. And it also will likely bring you down and regress you in that process, or cause other people to look at you as being the person with certain mental health issues. And it's likely the case that because of your reaction, Well, the reaction that you have, I think, is genuine and normal, and I think it to be expected, and the notion of righteous rage. And you can use that righteous rage to catalyze things in your life so that you can grow and develop. But you can also use that righteous rage to get stuck and ruminate and also react to the narcissistic family and get involved with the superego of the family. It's not going to move it forward because the family is embedded in the shared fantasy. And so you're arguing with illusions and a pseudo reality. And because you're more in touch with reality, you're able to move forward and grow. The only way you can really do that is going no contact, or at least limiting contact, and getting in touch with reality. So this is just to understand that for narcissists, they're embedded in this shared fantasy. They take it to be real. And that's why it's tricky, because others online and literature will say that there's an evil element to narcissism. And I guess that's an open question I still have as well. But it does make sense that when you're interacting, let's say, with your mom and your father, and I think there is a genuine sense that they believe their lies and they believe their illusions. I don't think they really think they're doing anything intentionally harmful towards you. I, in fact, think that they think they're entitled, right? And they think they're superior. And they feel like their very presence in your life is to be admired and to be, you're supposed to have gratitude towards them. It's just very tricky and hurtful, because it's like, okay, you did this to me, you said these things. Let's say you had narcissistic rage, so they have usually narcissistic injury, so the false self can't take any feedback, and so they have likely some form of narcissistic injury. They likely had some form of narcissistic rage, or they at least manipulated and showed certain gaslighting, and then you call them out on it like a few days later, and because their memory and reality testing is off, I think they genuinely believe their lies. It's tricky because they fabricate it, so what to say. I think they know what they're doing, but they just don't care. And because they think they're superior, they default to that defense of just that they're all good. And because they believe this shared fantasy, they believe that you're the one not getting in line with reality and being difficult and harsh towards them. That's why you're a little bit dumbfounded. It's very frustrating, because normally when you argue with somebody or you have a disagreement with them, I think they usually at least are grounded in realities, so they know what they did probably, and they'll probably speak to some reality. But when you're dealing with a narcissist, it's not only one that they hurt you, but then two, they genuinely believe their pseudo-reality and their this dream state that they have, and they believe that you're being out of line and not showing proper reality testing. So again, you can't argue with a person like that. I think the best you can do is lick your wounds, go no contact or limit contact, connect back with yourself. Within that, you'll start to come back to your grounding in yourself. It's likely the case you're going to have a lot of anger, a lot of grief, because you're grieving a relationship or a family you never really had. And if you go back into the cycle, it's just going to continue, give them narcissistic supply, because if it's positive energy or negative energy, they don't really care in some capacity, or at least if they're not getting positive, they're okay with the negative. They've convinced a lot of people around them it's not going to be fruitful or productive for you to engage in that cycle or in that shared illusion. But when you go no contact and you get back to your own self and your own reality testing, and you deal with those emotions, that anger, that righteous rage, and you also deal with the grief, the loss, and you accept that you're likely never going to have reconciliation or any accountability, then you're going to have prolonged grief most likely. It's normal and okay to have anger, and that's going to exist for some time. But at the same time, you accept that this is who they are and that they're not healthy people. In this video, I wanted to talk about the difference between a psychopath and a narcissist. The narcissist is embedded in, believe their shared fantasy, and the psychopath uses the shared fantasy as a tool to manipulate and to get certain things they want. It's not productive to deal with someone who is pseudo or semi-psychotic and isn't in touch with reality and very much believes in the shared fantasy. And I think it's good to look at yourself and why you got convinced for several years in this reality distortion. It's likely the case that you had to accept that. It's interesting because you could be in a family, let's say it's very wealthy, or with, you're in a romantic relationship and the guy, praises you and gives you a lot of material wealth. So there's always a sense that you're living in an illusion to some degree. But because reality is harsh and can be suffering, it's hard to let go of that. That's why some people get stuck in it, because they want to take the virtual reality or the semi-reality, even if it's abuse and neglect. At least they have some sense that they have the shared illusion, and it probably goes back to primordial aspects of themselves, regressing to this mother-child relationship. But it's like the Matrix, right? When you take the red pill and wake up, reality can be harsh, but at least you're living in what's real. And you also then, the suffering and the abuse and neglect isn't going to be occurring because you have yourself. And even if it's that emptiness or loneliness, at least you're facing what's real, right? So it's better to be grounded in that reality, at least in the reality of suffering, than it is to live a lie and to exist in a dream-like state with the narcissist. And even if that's your family and you have to give up the sense that you have a family, I think that overall your mental, emotional health is going to be much more healthy, and you're just going to be a happier person. So yeah, if you did like this video, please like and subscribe. Thanks and have a great day.